So we're recording. Welcome everybody who is following us along on YouTube. So we have over here on the DocCam, we have some of our derivative rules from section 2.1, and we're going to continue to go here. So we also have derivatives of sine and cosine that we saw. We have this, the derivative of sine is cosine, and the derivative of cosine is negative sine. Okay, so these are our elementary derivative rules. We have our, where they're elementary because they're the sort of the building blocks of all the things that we're going to do so far. So these are specific types of functions. Cosine and sine are our first trig functions. Any variable to a number, you're going to use power rule. Derivative of a constant is always 0. In any exponential function, we have a number in the base. You'll have this. And then we have two rules for combining functions. So our first rule for combining functions is what we call the constant multiple rule, which is the derivative of a constant times any function is that same constant times the derivative. So if you have a constant times anything, it doesn't really change it a whole lot. You take the derivative like normal and then bring the constant out front. And then we have the sum rule, which says if you're adding two functions together, something like this, okay, then you have the sum rule. Right, so we had a lot of, right, we have a lot of rules so far, and what we did just before spring break is we we brought up the quotient rule. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave this on the DocCam, and I'm going to switch over to our Blackboard. Okay. So small over here on the right, can everybody still read the DocCam? Get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Is it too small to still read? Or can we still see what's over here on the DocCam?
You can't really see it. It's kind of small.
Barely.
Do you have the ability to make it larger? Like, can you double click on it or do anything like that? Bring it up?
No, I think it has to be like the main one you choose.
Nicole says you can.
If you hit the in the top left of the like face cameras, there's the show grid video, the show thumbnail video, and then show active speaker video. If you click that one, you can see the document camera and then expand it.
All right. Yeah. So Luke, you said click show grid.
Yeah, there's the show grid, show thumbnail, show active speaker, and then hide thumbnail all in the top left of the face cameras. If you hit show active speaker video, if you click that one, you can expand the document camera.
Mm-hmm. So if I click on the show grid video, double click, then I can expand my DocCam to make it a little bit bigger. Got it. All right, we are good. Excellent. Okay, so I think this is a good way. We can keep these up here, right? So they can keep them displayed, and then I'll use this Blackboard. So down here, when we have these two rules at the bottom, constant multiple and then the sum rule, what these are, there are ways to combine functions. Okay, so these are two things that we're combining, right? So we're combining functions. We're either multiplying by a constant or we're adding things together. And so now what we want to do is we want to think about the product rule. Okay. So the product rule says, what do we do if we take two functions and we multiply them together? Okay, so just like we had before, we looked at our functions and we said, what happens if I add them together? And adding them together, we would just take the derivative of each part separately. Turns out that that doesn't work for the product rule. Okay, so the product rule, what happens is it comes in 4 parts. Okay, so you're going to have to consider both of your functions, right? So you're going to have to consider your f of x here, and you're going to have to consider your g of x here as 2 different pieces. Okay, so in the 4 parts, there's going to be 2 parts that involve f, and there's going to be 2 parts that involve g. Okay, so it's going to go something like this. So we take our first function, and we multiply by the derivative of our second function. Okay, so the first part here we have our f, and then the second part here we have our g. Okay, and then what we do when we go back to the other part, we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to take the derivative of the other piece. Okay, and so again, when we look at this, we have something that, we have something that involves f, and then we have something that involves g. Okay, so this is our product rule, and so if we want to look at an example, okay, so I'm going to try to get a little bit fancy here and move this up. Okay, so we're going to have our product rule up here, and let's see if we can do an example to see what this looks like. Okay. So what would an example product rule problem look like? So we could have something like, let's take our function, let's say sine of x times e to the x, and we want to take the derivative of this. Okay, so let's pause for a minute here and see if we can use, right? So we see if we can use all of our rules together to figure out the derivative of this function, right? So I'm going to pause for a minute, let my voice rest, and give you a moment to try out this derivative, sine of x times e to the x. All right, so you can keep going along at home here, but what we'll do is we'll try to think about this as you're going along. Okay, so when I when I do product rule, I like to think about it as a framework, and so we're going to do something very similar for quotient rule as well. So when I look at this sine of x times e to the x, I notice that it's a product, and I have 2 pieces, right? I have my sine x here, and then I have my e to the x right here. And what I know is that the sine x is going to have 2 of these parts that are relevant, and the e to the x is going to go into two of these parts. So if I understand the framework of the product rule, I know that there's these four pieces. I can go through and I can necessarily sort of fill in a lot of this without actually having to take any derivatives. So if we notice this part right here, so this f of x, there's no derivative here. And then this part over here, this g of x, there's no derivative on this one either. So if I just go ahead and fill in my spots, right? So my f of x, this is sine x. And then my g of x over here, this is e to the x. So I'm already halfway done with this problem. I haven't even taken a derivative yet. Okay, so f of x is sine x, g of x is e to the x. And now in these other two spots, okay, so in this spot, I have to put g prime. So I need to think about, hey, what is g prime? And in this spot, I have to put f prime. Okay, so as I go through, now this is the only point in this problem where I'm actually going to take a derivative. So for this spot right here, I'm going to think, right, so this first blue spot, this spot right here, I'm going to think, okay, what is the derivative of e to the x? And if I refer to my my dot cam over here, we're using exponential rule, right? So this is e to the x times the natural log of e. That should be the derivative of e to the x. And in this case, we know the natural log of e is just 1. So this derivative is just e to the x. And then when I go to this spot over here, I think about it and say, okay, f prime, well, f is sine x. So derivative of sine of x over here on my dot cam is cosine. So in this spot, I should just have cosine x. All right, and so this is a quick example on how we would do our product rule. Okay. So let's go ahead and bring up our book. Okay. So in our book here, we can see, right? So this is our product rule, and what I want to do now is give us the opportunity to think about activity 2.3.2. So this is a little bit of a review. We did this, so if you were in class on Friday before spring break, which seemed like an eternity ago. So let's go ahead and let's think about this activity 2.3.2 for a few minutes. So just quickly, did we already think about this, or do we need some time to think about it? So you can put stuff in chat, or do we want a moment to think about this activity 2.3.2, or do we feel pretty good about it? I know not everybody made it to that class. Feel pretty good about this one. So yeah, so far, right? So far, all the stuff I've covered up to this point has been reviewed. So we feel pretty good about it. All right, so let's do a little experiment here. People aren't being totally talkative. So I'm going to pause the recording here.